The humid Alabama air hung heavy over the small town of Elmwood, a place where time seemed to crawl like molasses on a hot day. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the gravel parking lot of the old clubhouse, a weathered building that had once been a barn, now repurposed as a gathering spot for men who clung to outdated hatreds like lifelines. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of stale beer, tobacco smoke, and the faint metallic tang of rust from the ancient ceiling fans that whirred lazily overhead. Kyle Norris leaned back in his rickety wooden chair, his belly straining against the buttons of his flannel shirt. "You should have seen that boy run. Damn. He was scared shitless," he exclaimed, his voice booming through the room like a shotgun blast. Laughter erupted from the group, a chorus of rough, guttural chuckles that echoed off the peeling walls adorned with faded Confederate flags and yellowed posters preaching "Heritage, not hate," a slogan none of them truly believed. Bill Dawson, a burly man with a perpetual squint from years of chewing tobacco, shouted over the din, "Did you take a shot at him?" To punctuate his question, he launched a gooey wad of spit from the gap in his front teeth, aiming for the spittoon in the corner, but missing wildly. "Jesus, Bill. You damn hit me with that," Russell Holloway barked, wiping a speck of brown liquid from his sleeve with exaggerated disgust. The room fell into a momentary hush as Russell rose from his seat, his tall frame casting a shadow over the table littered with empty cans and half-eaten bags of pork rinds. "Sorry, Russell," Bill muttered sheepishly, his cheeks flushing under the scrutiny of the group. Russell just shook his head and headed toward the bathroom, his boots thudding heavily on the creaky floorboards. As soon as the door clicked shut behind him, the chatter resumed with renewed vigor. "Y'all, listen. Did y'all hear that the Grand Wizard is going to make Russell the leader of our branch?" Kyle announced, his eyes gleaming with excitement. The news rippled through the room like a stone skipped across a pond. "Wade Walters is finally going to come down from his perch out there in Tuscaloosa? He finally came to his senses and is going to honor Russell. Our boy Russell is the biggest nigger hater this side of the Mason-Dixon line." "Great choice," Bill interjected, slamming his fist on the table for emphasis. "I couldn't agree with y'all more," Earl Holloway boomed, his voice like thunder. Earl was Russell's best friend since childhood, a bond forged in the backwoods of Alabama where they had hunted squirrels and dreamed of upholding what they called Southern pride. Everyone turned to look at Earl, who smiled broadly as he reached into the front pocket of his grease-stained overalls and pulled out a can of Skol. He took a fat pinch and shoved it into his cheek, the ritual as familiar as breathing. Before anyone could respond, the sound of the toilet flushing echoed through the thin walls, followed by the creak of the bathroom door. Russell reemerged, his face composed, though a flicker of something unreadable passed through his eyes. "So, y'all coming to the meeting tomorrow?" Russell asked, scanning the room with a steady gaze. Heads nodded enthusiastically, murmurs of agreement filling the air. Russell nodded back and made his way to the coat rack by the door, grabbing his worn denim jacket. "You're leaving already?" Kyle asked, surprise evident in his tone. "Yeah, wife needs my help. Duty calls. See y'all at the meeting tomorrow." "I have an announcement that y'all won't want to miss," Russell said, forcing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We ain't gonna miss it," Earl shouted, raising his beer in salute. Russell smiled, waved, and stepped out into the cooling evening air. The door swung shut behind him, muffling the laughter inside. He paused on the porch, taking a deep breath, the scent of pine and distant rain mingling with the fading tobacco smoke. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his phone and checked the time, 6:45 p.m. Betty Lynn, his wife of 15 years, expected him home by 8, especially on nights when he drank with the boys. But tonight, he had just enough time for a detour. A smile tugged at his lips as he thought of Rachel Jackson. She was everything his world forbade, beautiful, intelligent, and black. Their affair had started innocently enough, 2 years ago, at the local hardware store where she worked the register. A shared joke about a faulty wrench had led to conversations, then stolen moments, and finally, a love that burned brighter than the Alabama sun. Russell knew the risks. In a town like Elmwood, where crosses still burned in the night and whispers of the clan echoed in every bar, discovery meant death. But love had a way of blinding even the most cautious man. He glanced over both shoulders, ensuring no one was watching, then hopped into his battered Ford pickup. The engine roared to life, and he pulled out of the parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. As he drove toward the two-family house on the outskirts of town where Rachel lived, the sky darkened, stars beginning to prick the velvet canopy above. At first, the smell of smoke was faint, like a distant barbecue. But as he turned onto her street, it grew stronger, acrid and choking. Russell's heart skipped a beat. Leaning forward, he peered through the windshield, his blood turning to ice. Flames danced wickedly from the windows of the old wooden house, smoke billowing into the night sky like a malevolent spirit. "Oh God, no," he whispered, slamming on the brakes. He leaped out of the truck, the heat hitting him like a wall as he sprinted toward the inferno. No fire trucks yet, the blaze must have just started. Panic clawed at his throat, but he pushed it down. Rachel loved napping on her favorite couch by the front window after a long shift. The flames were advancing, licking at the siding like hungry tongues. Without hesitation, Russell elbowed the window, glass shattering in a cascade of shards. Pain lanced through his arm, but he ignored it, tumbling inside onto the smoke-filled living room. He landed awkwardly on the couch, right on top of Rachel. "Oh my God," she cried, her eyes wide with terror. Russell scrambled off her, coughing as thick smoke poured in. "Rachel, we gotta go." She was in shock, frozen for a moment, but he grabbed her arm, hauling her toward the broken window. Flames roared closer, heat searing his skin. He shoved her out first, then dove after her, landing in a heap on the grass. Rachel scrambled to her feet, gasping. "What about the family upstairs?" Russell asked, staring up at the roof where flames now crowned the structure. "They're on vacation," Rachel replied, her voice trembling. "Thank God," he muttered, catching his breath. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Panic surged anew. If anyone saw him here with her. "Come on," he cried, grabbing her hand. "Okay." She followed, still dazed. He bundled her into the truck, glancing back as fire engines rounded the corner. No one seemed to notice them yet. He sped away, heart pounding, one hand on the wheel, the other rubbing her knee as she coughed from the smoke. As they drove into the night, Russell's mind raced. Betty Lynn was waiting. The group would hear about the fire. And if anyone connected the dots. He flicked the high beams nervously. "Do you think I should go to the hospital? What about my house? Shouldn't I go back and talk to the firemen? See if there's anything left?" Rachel asked, sitting up, coughing again. "Rachel," he said softly, "we have to think very carefully about what we do next. You and I both know what would happen if people found out about us. I don't know why you just don't tell everyone about us. Don't you love me?" Her voice cracked, sadness mingling with the smoke's rasp. "Honey, you know I love you. That's not the point." "You and I both know how I'm viewed here," he replied, his grip tightening on the wheel. "Yes, and you know how much I hate that," she groaned, turning to stare out the window. "I know. But if they find out, they'll kill you and me. Hell, they might even kill us at the same time. So, what are we going to do?" she asked, worry etching her features. "Drive as far from here as we can and get a hotel room. Then we'll deal with everything else tomorrow. What about your wife?" "I'll take care of her. I just think it would be wise not to return to town tonight. I know a motel not far from here. We'll stay the night there." "Okay, dear." She leaned against the window, closing her eyes. Russell glanced at her, smiling outwardly, but inside, turmoil churned. What would he tell Betty Lynn? How could he keep this secret? They arrived at the Shady Oak Motel, a rundown place off the highway with flickering neon signs and peeling paint. Russell paid in cash, no questions asked, and led Rachel to their room. She collapsed on the bed, exhausted, while he paced, his mind a whirlwind of fear and love. That night, as she slept, Russell sat by the window, staring into the darkness. He had built his life on lies, pretending to hate to fit in, all while loving the very person his friends despised. Now, the fire had ignited more than wood. It threatened to consume everything. The next morning dawned with the relentless Alabama sun piercing through the thin motel curtains, humidity already thick in the air like a wet blanket. Russell had barely slept, his mind replaying the events of the previous night in an endless loop. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching Rachel's chest rise and fall in peaceful slumber. Her dark curls fanned across the pillow, and for a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a life where they didn't have to hide, a life far from Elmwood's poisoned roots. "Are you okay, honey?" he asked softly as she stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "As long as I'm with you, I'm okay," she replied, flashing a big smile that melted his worries, if only temporarily. He touched her arm, and she placed her hand on his, their fingers intertwining. They lay there for a while, the sunlight warming their skin, a brief oasis in the storm. But reality intruded. "You go back," Rachel said suddenly, sitting up. "My sister Rebecca will come and get me. I'll tell her where I am. Go now. You're right, if they find out about this, we'll both die together." She leaned over and kissed him, a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of all the words they couldn't say. Russell kissed her back, his heart aching, then pressed his lips to her forehead. At the door, he turned and blew her a kiss. She caught it, winking, and he forced himself to leave before doubt could paralyze him. Outside, the heat hit him like a furnace. He climbed into his truck and dialed Betty Lynn, his wife. They had married young, high school sweethearts bound by family expectations and small-town traditions. She was a good woman, kind in her way, but their marriage had long since cooled into routine. "Hey, darlin'," he said when she answered. "Russell? Where are you? You didn't come home last night." "I'm sorry, Betty. A friend needed help, out-of-town emergency. I'll be back later today." She sighed, a mix of frustration and resignation. "All right, but be safe. I worry about you." "I know. Love you." The words felt hollow, but he said them anyway. By the end of the call, she sounded mollified, wishing him well. Russell drove aimlessly at first, avoiding Elmwood. Dusty backroads wound through cotton fields and pine forests, the landscape as familiar as his own regrets. He thought back to his childhood, raised by a father who spewed venom at anyone different, joining the group to belong, to feel powerful. But meeting Rachel had shattered that facade. She was a teacher's aide, smart and compassionate, with dreams of leaving Alabama for somewhere tolerant. Their love had grown in secret meetings, stolen nights, each one a risk worth taking. As the day wore on, uncertainty gnawed at him. Had anyone seen them at the fire? What if Rachel's neighbors mentioned a white man pulling her out? The questions piled up like storm clouds. He stopped at a roadside diner for coffee, the bitter brew doing little to steady his nerves. By afternoon, he decided to head back, but cautiously, scouting the town from afar. Meanwhile, back in Elmwood, the clubhouse buzzed with anticipation. Russell's friends Kyle, Bill, Earl, and others gathered early, beers cracking open as the sun climbed high. The air hummed with excitement for the Grand Wizard's visit. Wade Walters was a legend in their circles, a silver-tongued orator from Tuscaloosa who commanded respect and fear. Kyle wheeled out the rusty grill, dumping charcoal in with a clang. "Who's bringin' the burgers?" he hollered. "I got 'em," someone yelled back. Suddenly, tires screeched as a gray Camaro tore into the lot, kicking up dust and gravel. Earl, beer in hand, waved his arms furiously. "You out of your damn mind," he shouted, marching toward the car. Bill Dawson stepped out, his face pale and urgent. "Y'all ain't going to believe this," he shouted, slamming the door and brushing past Earl. He stopped at the clubhouse entrance, turning to the group. "Y'all better get y'all's asses in here. There's something y'all need to know right now." The men exchanged glances, then filed inside, murmuring. Earl paused, eyeing Bill. "This better be good. Wade's on his way." "Good, he's gonna want to hear this too," Bill replied, ushering him in. Inside, the room fell silent as Bill paced. "I was driving by that nigger neighborhood this morning, checking on that fire from last night. Talked to some folks. Neighbors saw a white man pull that black girl out. Described him perfect. Tall, dark hair, denim jacket." "Sound familiar?" Murmurs rippled. "Who?" "Russel," Bill said flatly. "And get this, they've been seeing him around her place for months. Sneaking in at night." The room erupted in disbelief. "No way. Russell's one of us." "You mean to tell me that Russell, the biggest nigger hater all of us have ever met, is with a black woman? You expect us to believe this?" Earl demanded, his face reddening. "Yes," a booming voice interrupted from the doorway. All eyes turned to see Wade Walters, resplendent in his white robe, standing like a ghost from the past. Gasps filled the air as he strode to the center. "I've heard rumors myself. If it's true, it's betrayal of the highest order." He reached into his robe and pulled out 2 nooses, tossing them to the floor. "Prepare. Justice will be swift." The men nodded, a dark resolve settling over them. Outside, the grill smoked unattended as plans formed. Russell, unaware, finally approached town as evening fell. His phone buzzed, text from Earl. "Where you at?" "Meeting startin'. He replied vaguely, heart pounding. Little did he know, the net was closing. Rachel, meanwhile, waited for her sister. Rebecca arrived in a beat-up sedan, hugging her tightly. "What happened?" "The house is gone." "I'll explain later," Rachel said, glancing around nervously. "Just get me out of here." As they drove away, shadows lengthened, and fate wove its tragic web. Twilight descended on Elmwood like a shroud, the air thick with the scent of charred wood from distant fires and the metallic promise of rain. The clubhouse glowed with lantern light, shadows dancing on the walls as the group awaited their leader's decree. Wade Walters stood at the head of the room, his robe billowing slightly in the draft from the open door, exuding an aura of unyielding authority. The nooses lay on the floor like coiled serpents, symbols of the justice they had meted out countless times before. Whispers filled the air, doubt, anger, betrayal. Russell had been their idol, the man who led chants at rallies, who organized patrols through minority neighborhoods. To think he had been living a double life. The door creaked open and Russell stepped in, his face a mask of forced calm. He scanned the room, noting the tension, the accusatory stares. "Evenin', boys." "Wade," he nodded to the Grand Wizard, trying to project confidence. Before anyone could respond, the door burst open again. "We got her," Tommy Hemingway announced, dragging a struggling Rachel inside, flanked by 2 burly men. Rachel's eyes widened in terror, locking onto Russell's. "No," he cried, lunging forward. He reached for her, but a blow to the back of his head sent stars exploding in his vision. The world tilted, and he crumpled to the floor, darkness swallowing him. When Russell awoke, the world was upside down, or so it felt. Rough rope bit into his neck, his hands bound behind him. He blinked, focusing on the scene, a clearing behind the clubhouse, lit by torches and the headlights of parked trucks. A sturdy oak tree loomed, 2 ropes slung over a thick branch. To his left, Rachel hung similarly, her whimpers piercing the night. Tears streamed down her face as she met his gaze. "Russell." "Rachel, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice hoarse. The crowd encircled them, his former friends, Betty Lynn among them, her face a mask of shock and hurt. Wade stepped forward, raising his arms. "Looks like I arrived just in time. For not 1, but 2. A double lynching." Haven't had one of those in a long time. Brings back memories, I have to say. Laughter rippled through the group, cold and merciless. Russel struggled against his bonds, but it was futile. Memories flooded him, childhood beatings for showing weakness, joining the group to escape poverty, the first time he questioned their hate after meeting Rachel. She had shown him books, stories of civil rights heroes, chipping away at his indoctrination until love replaced prejudice. A tear escaped as he locked eyes with Betty. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. She turned away, tears glistening. Wade signaled, and the ropes tightened. Russel gasped, feet leaving the ground. Beside him, Rachel choked out, "I love you." The world blurred, cries, applause, the snap of branches. Darkness claimed them, two souls bound in tragedy, victims of a hatred Russel had once perpetuated. In the aftermath, Elmwood whispered of the traitor and his mistress, a cautionary tale. But in quiet corners, some wondered if change was possible, if love could conquer even the deepest divides. The fire that started it all had burned more than a house. It had exposed the fragility of facades. Yet, in the South's shadows, old ways died hard.